What's up, ladies, braves, and gentlemen? It's House Hill with Dark Enlightenment. Would you let someone you didn't know determine who you are, what you were?
Everything is a question, too. Hey, what am I, an asshole?
Well, it's happening today. It's been happening and it's still happening in this modern day. We always allow people to put labels on us. And no matter the method they tell us they use, we refuse to find out anything about it. Well, in this case, where people are always telling you who you are, this modern day, they're bringing DNA to tell you, you came from here, you are this, you are that. You get a deep understanding of what the people that are telling you who and what you are, what they're telling you. You need to understand what the scientists are telling you and what the DNA sites and all these different advertisements for DNA genetic heritage. Genetic heritage can't possibly be established by mitochondrial DNA at this present point because they're using fossil remains for the DNA material, and then they retrieve the mitochondrial DNA. We'll go through this knowledge. We'll give you knowledge so you can determine, do you want them to determine where, who, what you are, where you came from, what you are, who you are, African American, Negro, Black, mulatto? Take your choice. The introduction of molecular biology into paleoanthropology has established a new discipline, molecular anthropology. Debates with regards to the origin of modern Homo sapiens have grown increasingly heated since its advent. The hypothesis of human origin proposed on the basis of fossil records can now be examined in light of genetic data more quantitatively than ever before. Quantitative and objective information about the evolutionary history of the human species can now be gathered through molecular biology. It has provided new insights into our genetic divergence from apes into the way in which humans are related to one another. Can, 1987. The various theories surrounding the origin of anatomical modern humans have been the hottest controversy in anthropology over the last 2 decades. The focus of molecular biology as it applies to paleoanthropology has been centered on a single organelle within the human cell, the mitochondrion. It is hoped that with the help of mitochondria, the hottest debate in anthropology will move one step closer to being resolved. At this point, it is not resolved. Mitochondria, found in all mammalian cells, are bacterium-sized organelles that provide a location for a variety of cellular functions, namely lipid metabolism, the citric acid cycle, cellular respiration, and oxidative phosphorylation. They have sometimes been referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. Not only is their function vital to the life of the cell, but their evolutionary history provides insights into the more unique properties of the mitochondrion. According to the endosymbiotic theory, spearheaded by Lynn Margulis, it is believed that billions of years ago, mitochondria were free-living bacteria that established a symbiotic relationship with their primordial host organism. Campbell, 1996. Eventually, these independent bacteria were integrated into the life cycle of their host cells and became one with them, resulting in our typical eukaryotic cell. Spawning from this unique evolutionary history, it is no surprise that mitochondria contain their own DNA called mitochondrial DNA. In fact, the mitochondrion is the only cellular organelle other than the nucleus to contain its own DNA. The importance of the mitochondrial to the study of modern human origins is not their value to the life of the cell itself, but rather two key properties: its rate of mutation and its mode of inheritance. The rate of mutation in mtDNA is several times faster than that of the nucleus. Furthermore, unlike nuclear DNA, mtDNA is inherited from its mother alone, and thus does not recombine. Due to its rapid and steady mutations, mitochondrial DNA behaves like a fast-ticking clock, which allows for identification of recent genetic changes. Most anthropologists and other respected authorities on the subject are, at present, divided among two leading camps with different theories on modern human origin. Propose that anatomically modern humans evolved as a separate species roughly 200,000 years ago in Africa. Stringer and Andrews, 1988, known as the recent African original model. It also postulates that this very same species spread throughout the old world, replacing populations of the archaic humans as a result of their better adapted traits. At the opposite end of the spectrum lies the multi-regional community camp, headed by Milford Wilpop, Alan Thorne, 1991. In a nutshell, Wilpop believes that the fossil evidence for human evolution clearly demonstrates that the living groups of humankind came not only from Africa, but also from ancestors who lived in the same regions as they do now, as much as 1,000,000 years ago. The basis of this theory lies on the substantial gene flow among small populations that were thinly scattered across 3 continents. For a diagrammatic representation of these leading models of modern human origins, refer to Figure 1. According to the multi-regional model, the appearance of Homo sapiens was primarily the result of gene flow, local selection, and genetic drift, thus simply continuation of long-term trends in human evolution. Wolpaw, 1996. The most active proponents of such a scenario have even gone so far as to suggest that the title of Homo sapiens be reallocated to include all specimens presently included under the title of Homo erectus. The Out of Africa model states that modern Homo sapiens evolved in Africa recently and quickly expanded into the rest of the old world, replacing existing populations of Homo erectus and archaic Homo sapiens. The multi-regional evolution model states that Homo erectus populations expanded out of Africa close to 2 million years ago and became established throughout the old world by means of gene flow between local populations. Conversely, the model of the recent African origin proposes that a racially undifferentiated stock of modern humans evolved in Africa and spread throughout the world, developing geographically differentiated features in the process. This theory would imply that archaic lineages mixed little, if at all, with early humans, but instead were replaced by them. Thus, genetic and morphological variations should be the greatest within African populations. Paleoanthropologists like Wolpoff, for instance, who favor multi-regionalism, rely on the study of external evidence disclosed in bones and teeth of the fossil record to explain the emergence of modern humans. On the other hand, geneticists rely on the evidence explicit on the internal structures of the living cell, in particular the organelle. But keep in mind that the samples that they get for the cells to extract the mitochondrial information, they get those samples from bone and teeth. So all of these always come back to the bone and teeth samples, the skeletal remains. All of the available data on mitochondrial DNA studies point to two conclusions. First, present-day mitochondrial lineages can be traced back to an ancestor originating somewhere between 50,000 and 500,000 years ago. Second, based upon paleogenetic trees using maximum parsimony, this ancestor probably lived in Africa. Thus, the three predictions made by the African Eve hypothesis have been buttressed by current mitochondrial DNA evidence, which was derived from what samples now? Did you see these samples come out of the ground? And what ground did they come out of? Who was holding these ancient bone samples? Was it the Smithsonian? Was it the Catholic Church? The Vatican? Was it one of your Harvards or Yales who have bone samples of Africans in their collections? Where did these samples come from to retrieve this mitochondrial DNA? This aspect of African Eve hypothesis is the idea that this common ancestor is a single woman from whom all life sprang, hence the notion of Eve. However, the mitochondrial DNA ancestor was not the only individual alive. She was a member of a particular population, but the mitochondrial DNA types of her contemporaries ultimately became extinct because they or their descendants left either no offspring or only male offspring. Eve, as we call her, was not the first woman on the planet. She too had ancestors, but she represents the point at which all contemporary mitochondrial DNA types coalesce. Yet, they told us earlier that all of these came from one common ancestor. One. Now, she was a member of a particular population. So which one is it? Was it a single Eve, or did she come from a population of people and she's not a single woman? And they say this is a common misconception of the aspect of the African Eve hypothesis. Hypothesis, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, by tracing the history of our present-day mitochondrial DNA lineages, we should find an ancestor whom all our lineages belong. An ancestor. An ancestor. And I thought "an" was one. An ancestor, not ancestors. They said an ancestor, and then concluded to tell us that this way of thinking was incorrect. So, very confusing. This whole argument is based in hypotheses, theories, what people think, and they're placing labels on us and telling us based on erroneous samples, bone samples, teeth samples that could have been washed over, could have came from anywhere, unverified samples. They're telling us where we're from. They're putting labels on us and telling us our lineage. They're telling us who we are.
Can you name any other group that are being labeled primarily as the name of two continents? That is called a misnomer, which is the act of applying a wrong name to some person or thing. And why do you continuously call yourselves black people when your skin complexion is realistically different shades of the color brown? We were lawfully called Indian, mulatto, Negro, and then colored, right? Then some mysterious things happened in history where our very own people began to claim that they were black and proud. The etymology of the word black means colorless or the absence of color, which is true because if you were cut all the lights out, you would only see darkness. So if we were just being lawfully labeled as colored previously and now gravitating towards calling ourselves black, then we are inadvertently placing ourselves in a state of not being present, non-existent when it comes to our actual identities. And even more importantly, when it comes to law.
Well, you want to know how DNA ancestry is determined by these particular people you subscribe to tell you where you came from, tell you who you are? Well, I'll tell you, and they tell you. When a customer takes an ancestry DNA test, our scientists compare their DNA piece by piece to see which reference group each piece of the customer's DNA most closely resembles. The ethnicities assigned to each piece of DNA are then totaled up and the percentages are calculated. If 15% of the DNA pieces analyzed look mostly like the France reference group, then the customer gets 15% France in their ethnicity estimate. So, who determines the reference group? Who is in this French reference group? How are they getting DNA from these people and saying, these are French people right here? Anyone could make their own model of a reference group or, combining these reference groups and determining what group came from what region and if they belong there. The whole thing is totally illogical.
This is exactly what Can, Stoneking, and Wilson did in 1987 and found out that, in fact, all humans alive today do have a common female ancestor who probably lived about 200,000 years ago in Africa. They named her Mitochondrial Eve.